The noose swayed in the dry summer wind. A gallows had been built the night before, fresh wood still smelling of pine, sharp and clean, in stark contrast to the dust and sweat of the crowd gathered in the square. The frontier town of Willow Creek didn't see many hangings, and when it did, folks came from miles around, hitching their wagons to watch justice or what passed for it unfold. Children clung to their mothers' skirts. Men leaned on rifle stocks. A blacksmith had shut his forge early just to get a good spot. There was laughter, jeers, a few bets being taken. In the Wild West, spectacle was as good as Sunday church dot, and up on the platform, with wrists bound, stood Clara Walsh. Her face was pale, but her eyes weren't empty. There was fire there, though dulled by weeks of hunger and sleepless nights. She wore a faded dress patched too many times to count. Her hair, once chestnut and shining, was tangled and streaked with gray, though she was not yet 30. The sheriff's deputy tightened the rope above her head, tugging it twice to test the strength. A crowd hushed as the sheriff himself stepped forward, unrolling a slip of paper with far more pomp than it deserved. Clara Walsh, his voice carried, flat and practiced. You stand guilty of theft stealing food from Mr. Harlan's store. By the laws of this territory, punishment is death by hanging. Sentence to be carried out here at noon. He didn't look at her boys when he said it. Two small figures pushed to the front of the crowd, eyes wide and wet. One was maybe 5, the other 7, both barefoot, both gaunt from too many nights without supper. They clutched each other like drowning sailors, their faces smeared with dirt and tears. "Mama!" The littlest one cried out, his voice breaking. The crowd stirred uncomfortably. Some shifted their boots. Others muttered. A woman near the back whispered, "Lord, they're just children." But no one stepped forward. Clara swallowed hard. She stood straighter, pulling her shoulders back against the coarse rope scraping her neck. Her voice cracked but carried. "Don't cry, my boys. Don't you cry for me. You keep your heads high. You remember your mama did what she had to do. I did it for you." The deputy rolled his eyes. "Save your speeches, woman." But the crowd wasn't laughing now. They were watching her, some with pity, some with judgment, others with that cruel delight that comes only when watching another soul tumble into ruin. A man near the saloon chuckled darkly. "Stealing biscuits'll get you killed faster than robbing a bank. Ain't that something?" His buddies snorted into their whiskeys. Clara ignored them. Her eyes locked on her boys' tiny, fragile things in ragged shirts. All she wanted was for them to live, to eat, to grow old enough to swing a hammer or hold a plow. She'd begged for work. She'd scrubbed floors until her fingers bled. But when the youngest had fainted from hunger 2 nights ago, she'd gone to Harlan's store, heart pounding, and slipped a loaf of bread and some dried meat under her. Shawl dot, she hadn't made it 2 steps out the door before he'd grabbed her. Harlan now stood in the crowd, smug, arms crossed, belly straining his vest. His beady eyes never left her, savoring the moment. "Let this be a lesson," the sheriff continued, his tone as dry as the dust at his boots. "Law keeps us civilized. Without it, we're no better than savages." A preacher stepped forward, Bible in hand, voice solemn. "Daughter, would you like to make peace with the Lord before you meet him?" Clara's lips trembled. She glanced at her boys again. "I don't beg for myself. I beg for them. Don't let my sons starve. Please, if you've got mercy left in your hearts, see that they're fed." Her words cracked something in the silence. Even the hard-faced men looked down at their boots, but mercy in Willow Creek was in short supply. The deputy yanked the lever halfway down, testing it. The trapdoor groaned. The crowd braced, breaths caught. The littlest boy wailed, a sound too sharp, too raw for anyone to mistake. Clara shut her eyes. She whispered something no one could hear, and a voice rang out, sharp as a whip crack. "Hold it right there." The crowd turned as one. Boots scuffed on dirt. From the edge of the square, a man walked forward, hat pulled low against the sun. Dust clung to his duster coat. A revolver hung heavy at his hip, glinting in the noon light. He moved slow, deliberate, every step echoing with the kind of weight that made men straighten up and move aside. Without realizing it, the sheriff's jaw tightened. "Who the hell are you?" The man stopped a few paces from the gallows. He raised his head, revealing a scar that cut from temple to jaw, weathered eyes the color of storm clouds, and a look that said he'd seen enough death for 3 lifetimes. "Names: Eli Carter," he said, voice low but carrying. "And this hangin' ain't gonna happen." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some gasped, some cursed. Harlan's face twisted in fury. The sheriff barked, "You got no authority here, stranger." Eli didn't flinch. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small pouch. He tossed it at the sheriff's feet. Coins clinked more silver than most folks saw in a month. "That's her debt. Paid in full. You can keep your law, but you ain't talking her life." The deputy's hand twitched toward his revolver. The crowd tensed. Dust swirled. For a heartbeat, the whole world seemed to balance on a knife's edge. Clara opened her eyes. Her breath caught as she stared at the stranger standing below her, hat brim shadowing his face. She didn't know him, didn't know why he'd come. But her boys were staring at him like he was a miracle sent from God himself. The sheriff's jaw worked. His fingers brushed the pouch of silver. Then his gaze shifted to Eli's revolver, his stance, the steel in his eyes. And for the first time all morning, the sheriff hesitated. The rope creaked. The crowd held its breath. Clara's sons clung to each other, trembling. The town of Willow Creek, so sure of its justice, waited to see what one man, one stranger would do. Dot and Clara, with the noose still biting her throat, felt the first flicker of hope in weeks. The name rolled across the crowd like distant thunder. Eli Carter. Some whispered it. Others spat it. Most didn't dare say a word at all. Stories clung to that name like dust to boots dailies of gunfights in forgotten border towns, of bounties, collected with bodies still warm, of a man who had once been quicker on the draw than any two-bit outlaw west of the Mississippi. Folks said he'd vanished years ago, swallowed by war and whiskey, but here he was, standing in Willow Creek with steel in his eyes. The sheriff's mouth tightened. His hand hovered near his revolver, but he didn't draw. "Don't know what business you've got in my town, Carter," he said, voice sharp. "But the law's the law." Eli tilted his hat back, gaze never wavering. "Law don't mean hanging a mother for a loaf of bread." The crowd murmured again. Even those who'd come to see the show shifted, uneasy. Harlan, the storekeeper, waddled forward, face red as a branding iron. "She's a thief," he bellowed. "You let her go. Every hungry stray's gonna think they can take what they please from honest men." "Honest?" Eli's voice cut through him like a knife. "You charge 3 times what flour's worth. You weigh the scales heavy. Ain't nothing honest about bleedin' folks dry." Harlan sputtered, but the sheriff raised a hand. His eyes darted to the pouch of silver at his boots. The coins glittered in the sunlight. A temptation too strong for a man who drew a county wage. Eli didn't blink. His hand rested on the butt of his revolver like it belonged there. The deputy shifted uneasily, then spat in the dust and muttered, "Hell with this." He stepped back from the lever. The sheriff hesitated a moment longer, then bent down and scooped up the pouch. The weight of it pulled his shoulders low. Finally, with a scowl, he jerked his head. "Cut her down." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The deputy grumbled, but did as ordered. tugging the rope free. Clara staggered as the noose slipped from her neck, her knees buckling. For a second, she swayed like she might collapse right there on the platform. But then she felt too little. Bodies slam into her legs. "Mama!" Her boys cried in unison, their arms wrapping around her skirts. She dropped to her knees, clutching them to her chest, sobs racking her body. She buried her face in their hair, breathing them in like she'd been given air after drowning. Crowd broke. Some walked away, muttering about wasted time. Others lingered, staring at Eli Carter, as though he were a ghost or a legend come to life. Harlan's eyes narrowed. His pride had been gutted in front of the whole town. "This ain't over," he hissed, jabbing a fat finger toward Clara. "She'll pay. Mark my words." Eli's gaze shifted toward him, cold as winter. "Try it," he said simply. And that was enough to make even Harlan step back. They didn't linger. Eli guided Clara and her boys away from the gallows, his long strides forcing her to half-jog just to keep up. When they reached the edge of town, near the hitching posts where Eli's horse waited, he finally stopped. Clara clutched her boys tighter, chest heaving. "Why?" she rasped. Her throat was raw from the rope, her voice nearly gone. "Why would you do this for us?" Eli shrugged, as though he wasn't sure himself. "Ain't right, what they were fixing to do. That's reason enough." Her eyes narrowed. She wanted to believe him. But years of disappointment, years of watching men walk away when things got hard, kept her guard high. "You don't even know me." "No." He met her gaze steadily. "But I know what hunger looks like. I know what losing feels like." "That's enough." Her boys peeked around her skirts, eyes wide. Eli crouched down, meeting them at their level. His scarred face softened. He pulled a strip of jerky from his coat pocket and held it out. The youngest snatched it before his brother could, tearing into it like a starving pup. Eli raised a brow. "Guess I made one friend." He pulled out another strip and offered it to the older boy. This time the child hesitated, glancing up at his mother for permission. Clara gave a faint nod. The boy took it carefully, mumbling, "Thank you, sir." Eli smiled just a flicker, quick as a desert breeze. "Sir makes me sound older'n I am. Name's Eli." The boys looked at each other. One whispered, "He talks funny." Clara almost laughed, a dry, broken sound she hadn't heard from her own throat in months. She quickly smothered it, shaking her head, but Eli caught it, and he noticed the way her shoulders loosened just a hair, like the weight of the gallows. Rope had finally begun to ease Dot as they lingered by the horse. A shadow passed across them. Eli stiffened. His hand dropped instinctively to his revolver. A man stood across the street, half hidden in an alley. He was lean, hard-eyed, with a rifle. Slung low. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Then, like smoke, he melted back into the shadows. Eli's jaw tightened. He knew the look of a hired gun. Clara followed his gaze. Her breath caught. Who was that? "Trouble," Eli muttered. He adjusted his coat, scanning the rooftops, the corners, the alleys. "Harlan ain't gonna take today kindly. He'll want payback." Clara's stomach turned to ice. She hugged her boys closer. "Then we should go. We'll run." "We'll," Eli shook his head. "You won't get far. Not with bounty men coming. You'll need someone who knows how to keep." Ahead of him, Clara stiffened. "And that someone is you?" His gaze met hers again, steady and unflinching. "If you want your boys to live, then yeah." "It is." Her instinct was to refuse, to snap that she didn't need saving, not from another man who could vanish tomorrow. But behind her, she felt her boys' trembling hands clutching at her skirts, heard their little breaths catch, and she knew she couldn't do this alone. Not anymore. Fine. she said, her voice hard, though her heart shook. "But the moment I think you're leading us wrong, we're gone." Eli gave a short nod, like he respected that. "Fair enough." He swung up onto his horse, then extended a hand down to her. For a moment, she hesitated, staring at the calloused hand of a stranger who just changed everything. Then, with a deep breath, Clara placed her hand in his dot, and, as he pulled her up, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across Willow Creek. Shadows that promised the law, the storekeeper, and every hungry gunman in the territory would soon be on their trail. Eli Carter had stepped up. Stepping up meant stepping into a fight neither of them could yet imagine. The prairie stretched endless under a blood-red sunset, the kind of sky that felt like a warning. Eli rode at the front, broad shoulders hunched beneath his dust-stained duster. His horse's hooves drummed steady against hard earth, carrying them farther from Willow Creek with every mile. Behind him, Clara clutched her boys tightly, perched awkwardly on the back of a borrowed Mari. Her arms circled them like a shield. Every jolt of the ride rattled through her bones, but she kept, her chin up, eyes scanning the horizon. Her whole life, she'd never been more than a few miles from town. Now the land stretched out wide and wild, a freedom she hadn't asked for and wasn't sure she could handle. The younger boy dozed against her shoulder. The older one whispered questions, his small voice carried by the wind. "Mama, is that man gonna keep us safe?" Clara looked at Eli's back, the revolver at his hip glinting in the dying sun. She didn't answer. She couldn't, not yet. They made camp by a crooked cottonwood, the branches rattling in the evening breeze. Eli worked wordlessly, striking a fire, unrolling a blanket, checking his rifle with practiced motions. He moved like a man who'd done this too many times to count. Clara knelt with her boys, trying to hush their hunger. She'd hoped Eli had more jerky, but he came back from his saddlebags with only 2 strips. Without hesitation, he handed both to the children. Clara frowned. "What about you?" he shrugged, chewing a dry piece of tobacco. "Had worse nights." She studied him through the firelight. His scar caught the glow, his eyes fixed on the flames like they were the only thing keeping him tethered. There was something broken in him, but also something steady, like a man who'd already lost everything worth losing, and so had nothing left to fear. Her youngest curled up on Eli's coat and fell asleep almost instantly. The older one lingered, watching Eli with wide eyes. "Mr. Carter," he whispered, "were you really going to shoot the sheriff?" Eli's lips twitched. "Only if he made me." The boy's jaw dropped. "Mama says shooting's wicked." Eli leaned closer, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "So's hanging your mama for stealing bread. World ain't fair, kid. Sometimes you gotta choose which wicked you can live with." Clara bristled. "Don't fill his head with that." Eli met her glare across the flames. "I ain't fillin' it. Just tellin' him the truth." Their eyes locked, tension thick as the smoke curling skyward. But before Clara could snap back, her son lay down beside his brother, eyelids drooping. Within minutes, both were asleep. The silence left behind was heavy. The fire popped. Coyotes yipped far off in the dark. Eli leaned back against his saddle, hat tipped low. "You think I did wrong?" Clara hugged her knees to her chest, staring into the flames. "I think I don't understand you. Men don't do what you did today. Not for strangers." He didn't answer for a long time. Finally, he muttered, "Maybe I'm trying to balance the books." Her brow furrowed. "What? Books?" But he said no more. And she didn't press. Morning came sharp and merciless. They were back in the saddle before the sun cleared the horizon. The boys were still half asleep, their heads bobbing against Clara's arms. Eli rode ahead, every so often scanning the ridges, the horizon, the sky, like a hawk watching for predators out by. Noon. The heat was brutal. Sweat streaked Clara's face, her lips cracking. Eli passed her a canteen without a word. She wanted to refuse out of pride, but her boys' dry mouths forced her hand. "Thank you," she said grudgingly. He tipped his hat without looking back. The attack came at dusk. They'd entered a narrow canyon, red stone walls towering on either side, shadows stretching long. Eli's shoulders stiffened. His hand went to his gun. Then the first shot cracked. A bullet sparked against the rock inches from his head. The horses screamed, rearing. Clara clutched her boys tight as dust exploded. Around them, down. Eli barked. He swung from his saddle in one smooth motion, revolver already spitting fire. Men appeared from the rocks above, rifles glinting. Harlan had wasted no time hiring bounty hunters. Eli's shots were quick, brutal. One man toppled, another ducked. Back into cover. But there were too many. Lead whined past Clara's ears. Her boys screamed. She slid from the horse, dragging them down behind a boulder. Her hands shook so hard she could barely hold them. Her heart thundered like it would tear through her chest. Not another shot rang out closer this time. She turned. A bounty man had slipped down the canyon wall. Creeping up behind them, rifle aimed. Something primal surged through her. Her eyes fell on a revolver lying in the dust, dropped by a fallen gunman. Before she knew it, her fingers had closed around the grip. The weight was foreign, heavy. The man stepped closer. Her son's whimper-ed. Clara raised the pistol with both hands. Her whole body trembled, but she pulled the trigger. The gun kicked like a mule. The blast left her ears ringing. The man staggered, shock flashing in his eyes before he toppled face first into the dirt. Clara froze. Smoke curled from the barrel. Her hands shook violently. She'd never held a gun, never wanted to. But her boys were still breathing. Still alive. Eli glanced over, surprise flickering across his face even as he reloaded. He gave her the barest nod, then turned back to the fight. The ambush didn't last long after that. Outnumbered or not, Eli Carter fought like a man who'd danced with death too many times to count. By the time the last gunman fled limping into the rocks, the canyon was littered with groans and blood. The silence that followed was deafening. Clara still held the revolver. Her arms locked, her breath ragged. Her boys clung to her skirts. Wide-eyed. Eli strode over, dust rising around his boots. He looked at the dead man at her feet, then at her shaking hands. For a moment, he just studied her. Finally, he said dryly, "Guess you ain't just good at stealing bread." Her laugh burst out sharp, half hysterical, half relieved. It startled even her. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt something other than fear. She lowered the pistol slowly, letting it clatter into the dust. Then she scooped her boys into her arms, holding them so tight they squealed in protest. Eli turned, scanning the canyon. His jaw was tight. This was just the start, he muttered. Wordle spread fast. Harlan putting coin on your head means every two-bit killer west of here's gonna come sniffing. Clara's stomach churned. Why? Why would he want? Me dead that bad? Over food? Eli's gaze was grim. Ain't about food anymore. He feels mocked. Weak. Men like him'll burn the world before they let folks laugh at him. Her chest tightened. She remembered the smug gleam in Harlan's eyes, the humiliation he'd suffered when Eli had thrown silver at the sheriff's boots. She swallowed hard, her voice quiet but fierce. Then we'll fight. Eli raised a brow. You? She met. His gaze steady now, the trembling gone. I got no choice. I won't let my boys see me hang. I won't let them starve. If fighting's what it takes, then I'll fight. For the first time, Eli's lips curved not quite a smile, but close. Good, he said. You'll need that fire. And as night fell over the canyon, with shadows deepening and coyotes howling in the distance, Clara Walsh felt something she hadn't in a long, long time. Not fear. Not shame. Strength. The sun bled its last streaks across the frontier sky, turning the gallows into a black skeleton against a dying flame. The townsfolk lingered still, half expecting the noose to tighten after all. Whispers carried like rattlesnakes in dry grass. Would the judge reverse his mercy? Would the sheriff truly allow it? But the truth was already set in motion. Mary was free. At least, free from the rope. Chains of hunger, poverty, and whispers still clung to her. But for the first time in years, she felt the faint warmth of a door opening instead of slamming shut. And the hand holding that door open was his name, they learned, was Luke Callahan. A man who had drifted through towns like tumbleweed, never staying, never rooting. Folks whispered about him too. Some said he was a former gunfighter. Others swore he once rode with rangers. But no one knew why he had settled his boots so firmly on the gallows stage that day, facing down law, greed, and mob alike. Mary didn't. No, either. All she knew was that when he looked at her boys thin as reeds, clutching at her skirts, his jaw set in the same way it might before a duel. Only this duel wasn't against bullets. It was against shame. Against hunger. Against a world that had tried to bury her. "You've got a choice," he said later, when the crowd had thinned and the sheriff's men reluctantly released her. "You can walk away with nothing, or walk forward with me, not as a woman in chains, but as someone who deserves better." Mary's lips trembled. Why? His eyes softened, the storm in them quieting for the first time. "Because once a woman saved me when I didn't deserve saving. Guess this is my way of paying the debt forward." But freedom didn't mean safety. The next morning, the saloon roared with talk. Men who'd lost their bets on Mary's hanging spat curses. The storekeeper swore she'd never see credit again. Women muttered behind her back, some out of jealousy, some out of fear. And then came the ranch hands, rough men with nothing but whiskey and cruelty in their eyes, offering Luke money. Sell her, one sneered. Or sell the boys. Plenty of folks would pay for labor that cheap. The saloon went quiet, waiting. Luke's hand hovered near his holster, but it wasn't a gunfight brewing. It was a declaration. He stood slowly, eyes like iron nails hammered into the men's skulls. "They're not for sale. They're not cattle. They're family now." The word family hung in the smoky air like thunder before a storm. It couldn't end clean. The Wild West never allowed clean endings. By sundown, Luke and Mary's fragile hope was tested. The ranch hands who had tried to buy her returned, this time with pistols and grins carved sharp as knives. Luke stepped out onto the dusty street, Mary watching from the doorway, heart hammering against her ribs. The boys clutched her hands, whispering prayers. "You should have taken our offer," the leader growled. Luke didn't answer with words. The crack of his revolver split the twilight faster than the blink of an eye. One man dropped. Another stumbled back, clutching his shoulder. The rest scattered like coyotes under a torchlight. The street went silent, save for the echo of boots against wood as Luke turned back. Mary met his eyes, tears burning hot down her cheeks. Not from fear, from something she hadn't felt in years. Safety, belonging. That night, in the small cabin Luke had given them, Mary sat by the fire. The boys were asleep, curled together under a single blanket, faces soft with the peace only children knew. Looked at Luke, who was leaning against the wall, sharpening his knife. His profile flickered in the firelight, scarred, strong, tired. "You risked everything," she whispered. He shrugged. "Maybe I was tired of risking nothing." Her voice broke. "I don't know how to start over." Luke finally looked at her, and for once, She didn't see the stranger. She saw the man who had planted himself on that gallows stage, like an oak against the storm. "You already did," he said softly. Days turned to weeks. The gallows still stood in the town square, a skeleton of what almost was. But for Mary, it no longer loomed as a sentence. It stood as a reminder of the rope that never tightened, of the crowd that never cheered, of the man who stepped forward when no one else did. The world would keep testing them. Poverty didn't vanish overnight. Hunger came knocking often. But where once there had only been despair, there was now resilience. Where there had been fear, there was now fire. And where there had been silence, there was now laughter, small and fragile at first, but growing, like grass stubbornly breaking through hard-packed earth. And so a single mother who once stood, with the rope around her neck, found something rarer than mercy in the Wild West. She found someone who believed in her worth. The gallows still whisper in every town, every corner of history, about those who are lost to judgment and hunger. But sometimes they whisper too of the rare few who chose to stand up. Maybe that's the question worth asking tonight. Would you have stepped up? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes the most powerful noose isn't the one made of rope. It's the silence when no one dares to act.